Good afternoon, everyone. It's Pablo.zuanic, cannabis, hemp, CBD, cannabinoids equity analyst at Zuanic Associates. Welcome to all of you and thank you for tuning in. We have a panel today to discuss the growing market for what we call hemp-derived Delta-9 drinks. And we have a very interesting panel of speakers here that are going to share their thoughts on this growing sector. We have Christopher Lackner, founder president of the Hemp-Beverage Alliance. We have Adam Terry, CEO and founder of Cantrip. Brandon Harshbarger, president of Cheech and Chong, and Massolo, VP Business Development, Cycling Frog. Welcome to all the speakers.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you, Pablo.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, my pleasure. So let's start just with brief intros first. So Chris, let's start with you. Just some background on the Hemp Beverage Alliance, please. Thank you.
Sure, and thank you so much for the invitation. The Hemp Beverage Alliance is the trade association for the hemp beverage industry. We have over 230 members at this point in time. That includes members in Canada and, as of a couple of weeks ago, the United Kingdom. About 50% of our members are brands, and then another 50% are supply chain partners, whether it's manufacturing, co-packers, professional services, et cetera. Our organization is focused on primarily and almost exclusively getting these products, hemp-derived THC and CBD beverages on shelves anywhere where beer, wine, and hard seltzer are available. We strongly believe that this is the next category for the adult beverage consumer and that they need to be sold, marketed, retailed, and enjoyed in the same way as their alcohol counterparts.
Great, thank you. Adam, tell us about your company first. Whatever you can share about the company. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, Adam Terry, CEO of Cantrip. We're a THC drinks company that started off in the marijuana dispensary space here in Massachusetts back in 2021. We launched at the end of June 21. We made the move into hemp in middle of 22 after Minnesota passed their hemp-focused law. We were one of the first brands to make that jump from dispensaries into the hemp space. We're really excited to do so. And we've been growing our company in the hemp space ever since. We actually terminated all of our dispensary operations towards the end of 2023, and we're exclusively focused on working to sell through liquor stores and retailers across the United States on the hemp side. Primarily privately held. We've raised some traditional capital to date, primarily through friends and family investors, a couple more institutional investors, and we're going to keep trying to grow the company as best we can, as efficiently as we can.
That's great. Thank you. Art, go ahead.
Yes, so Cycling Frog is a company that's been around for actually since 2014, but it was mostly in soft gels and capsules at that time. We're part of a company called Lazarus Naturals, which is a 10-year-old CBD company based out of the Pacific Northwest. We've got 500 acres of our own hemp outside of Bend, Oregon. We have our own genetics. We do all of our own nano emulsification. We basically manufacture everything in-house other than beverages, which we co-pack in several states. So yeah, we've grown quite rapidly. We're one of the first brands out in the end of 2021. We launched in the Minnesota market like everybody else did. And now we're in 30 states with alcohol distributors and doing quite well.
Thank you. Brandon, go ahead.
I'm Brandon Harshbarger. I'm the president of Cheech and Chong. The entity was probably formalized in the past couple of years where essentially we were able to bring all the intellectual property for Cheech and Chong under one umbrella. That's allowed us to work kind of parallel tracks in both the regulated market as a licensing entity. We're in 20 plus markets, but we've also made a pretty aggressive move into the hemp-derived space in the past couple of years. We launched with edibles initially direct to consumer. And just slightly after these guys, I would say in the beginning of 2022 or end of 2022, beginning of 2023, we launched into the Minnesota market with our first beverage, high and dry, 5 milligram seltzer. It's done well. We've continued to scale across the country. We're probably in roughly 20 markets as well at this point, but really just scratching the surface of what beverages can do. We consider ourselves a 60-year-old startup with Cheech and Tommy kind of running the show.
That's great. Thank you. Look, for all of those you are listening out there, whether in Spaces or Zoom or other platforms, As usual, we take questions online via email, via the chat room in Zoom or via Spaces. But I ask the questions, I filter them, right? But please feel free to send your questions in. We will dig deeper into each company in terms of whether each participant can share. So Chris, let's just start with at the federal level, the regulatory landscape. Make the case for the legality of these drinks, and I'll let all the speakers use the term you want to use, right? I hear some people use the term weed drinks, some people call them hemp-derived, Delta-9 drinks, some people call them functional drinks because they are not all intoxicating. Is intoxicating or psychoactive the right word to use or the right term? But again, Chris, just made a federal case for legality, how the industry should or is regulated according to you, and if you can, as you touch also on the Wyden bill. Thank you.
Absolutely. So sure. So 2018, generally speaking, marks the beginning of the opportunities that we're talking about now with the passage of Farm Bill that allowed for a new definition of hemp that allowed these companies to thrive in such a way that hemp now became legal at the federal level as opposed to marijuana that continues to be illegal at the federal level. And from that, what we've seen is, when we talk about the language that we use to talk about the products, we are the Hemp Beverage Alliance. We tend to refer to them as hemp beverage because the ingredient is sourced from hemp, which is legal at the federal level. Other folks, everything ranges from D9, HD9. If you go into some of the retail establishments, they are just listed as THC drinks. And then the consumer, the important thing, and I think this is the big division, the consumer doesn't necessarily differentiate between marijuana and hemp. God bless them, they don't dive deep into regulatory issues quite like we do as an industry. And so from a consumer perspective, it's cannabis is cannabis, THC is THC, regardless of those federal definitions. When we talk about the industry, I think that there's going to be different ways to talk about the same thing, and it's eventually going to gravitate into one place or another. My suspicion is that over time, it's just going to be called THC drinks. But for now, we talk about them as hemp beverages. Hemp beverages do draw cannabinoids from the hemp plant, primarily CBD and THC, although other minor cannabinoids are also pulled from that, CBN and CBG perhaps being the next ones in line there. And generally speaking, THC is the quote-unquote psychoactive intoxicating cannabinoid, and CBD is not. These affect the brain differently. And so those are the key differentiators. And then when we talk about the different products that are on the market, each product is different. Each has different ratios or inclusions of those different cannabinoids, depending on what they want to do and what their consumer wants. When we talk about what the future is at the federal level and the current state of where we are with the federal level, Congress did approve the Farm Bill in 2018, but the Food and Drug Administration did not follow suit with creating a regulatory landscape to allow these to thrive at that in the way that we would all prefer. And so for the past 4 years, 5 years, et cetera, it's been a long standing discussion and debate on how best to create a federal framework that allows for these products to thrive. We talk about the Senator Wyden new bill that was introduced back in September. That is one proposed solution to solve that challenge of what to do from a regulatory perspective. As an industry, I think we are all very hopeful and thrilled to hear that a senior senator in the country is taking the lead to help solve this challenge for our industry and for our consumers as well. I think that's a good starting point, but I don't necessarily think that that's going to be a solution that's going to be created anytime in the future. Congress moves at an exceptionally slow pace, particularly as it relates to this category. And so I think we remain hopeful, but I think we should also recognize that we are moving at the speed of Congress, which is perhaps not as fast as we would all prefer.
Right. And look, we'll touch on state level developments later in the call, but Chris, as part of the alliance, how do you encourage what you would call good actor behavior in the industry?
No, absolutely. The Hemp Beverage Alliance does encourage best practices in manufacturing, retailing, and marketing. The obvious base level fundamentals that everybody agrees on across the board is, age gating these products to make sure they don't get in the hands of minors, using appropriate and proper labeling to make sure that these are not enticing to minors, and also labeling that empowers the consumer to make the wise choices that they want to be able to make. We don't want to have to, we have no interest in hoodwinking our consumers and getting them into a product that they're not interested in. And we also want to be mindful of, providing all consumers with the products that they want and the ability to get them in the places where they want them. And I think this is the key differentiator when we start talking about the difference between hemp beverages and perhaps dispensary products, that these products are generally low-dose products that are more akin to a glass of wine or a can of beer. They are sessionable, flavor-focused, and more often than not are seen as a choice with alcohol as opposed to a choice with another form factor of cannabis. And so, our belief is that these products need to be on the shelves where other adult beverages are sold. That would be liquor and retail places where there's a 21 age gating process.
Got it. Thank you. Look, I'm going to move the discussion now to the market opportunity, the market structure, the products out there. I'll start with you, Brandon. But if any of the speakers wants to chip in on the federal regulatory side of things, please do so. So, Brandon, just high level, how do you think about the size of the market, the opportunity? We look at a lot of numbers. Brightfield has very low numbers compared to what Whitney has, but anything you can share about the size of the market, projections, how is it developing, specific markets or states that are doing better than others? Also, if you can, as we go, and I know there's a lot here, talk about how you think about the market structure. Is it a very concentrated market from a brand perspective, or is it very fragmented? Let's start with that, Brandon.
Yeah. It's probably the easy answer. I think the expectations of market size are fairly balanced if you look at Brightfield and Whitney. I think Whitney is very, very optimistic, obviously. Brightfield report, we've seen that internally. We rank fairly high on the Brightfield Consumer Awareness Report. I think if you just draw parallels to the craft beer category, and then you look at data points out of Minnesota, where the product has seen what we would consider some mature activity. Granted, it's only a couple of years old, but it came on so aggressively in Minnesota with so much public awareness that I think nearly everyone in Minnesota is aware these drinks are now accessible in this traditional retail environment. And if you look at those numbers in comparison, you're seeing these THC drinks selling at a pace as fast as vodka, as fast as wine, as fast as craft beer. It's certainly pretty highly fragmented because it's a startup category. It's still in a regulatory landscape where you don't have major players on the supplier side really entering. Although we all know Tilray is now coming into the market aggressively. Curaleaf is coming into the market aggressively. We can expect probably some large craft beer companies will also enter pretty quickly, like Samuel Adams is, on the tip of a lot of people's tongues. Mm-hmm. From our perspective, I think that it's a $30 billion business in the next 5 to 10 years. Our goal as a company, maybe it's too aggressive, is to be a 10 share in that market in the next 3 to 5 years. And we're not sure what the product format is going to look like when we get there. So we're trying to just be strategic in how we bring new products into the category, knowing that fragmentation and brands moving in and out is probably going to continue to be pretty considerable over the next 18 to 24 months, because it's difficult to raise money in this environment. It's difficult to raise money for a product like this in a category that is, not necessarily completely opened up. So, there's just going to be probably some startup brands that don't quite have the traction to make it.
Right. Just a quick follow-up there. When you talk about we don't know what the format is going to look like, what do you mean by that? Like how much is psychoactive versus non-psychoactive? How much go on. Yeah.
I think like the conversation of psychoactive versus functional. There are states that are pushing back against something as simple as having caffeine included into cannabis beverage. We literally had a caffeinated product. We called it high energy. We launched it in California. It did really well in the localized California market, but we didn't see a reception on the East Coast that we would have expected. And that's because people were confused by caffeine and cannabis being included in the same beverage. To people that are normal cannabis users, the concept of, a joint and coffee is not foreign, but to the normal, average user, maybe that's different. But to see regulators state by state come in and decide to say, we don't want to see the inclusion of caffeine with cannabis, that's another step. So it tells me that in terms of how this category is going to evolve, I don't know how functional it can get if we see the market start to limiting these other options, right?
Yeah, if I could just jump in on that, Brandon, that's a really interesting point, I think, to touch on for a little bit longer. We also had an energy drink entry into the category, which we're currently in the process of sunsetting. And while we didn't have a huge presence in California at the time, we definitely saw a strong reaction across the Southeast, in particular for it. But the biggest barrier to that was one, like you said, the consumers. I would get feedback on Twitter all the time of one's an up or one's a downer, which is not really exactly how cannabis works, but that was kind of the general consensus among non-users. Whereas people who are typically used to consuming cannabis are very aware of how caffeine interacts with it. And the other issue is that there's sort of a barrier at the distributor, insurance, and retailer level where because it's unclear, they don't want to take on the risk of potentially combining the two things. And, the words Four Loko came up a lot during those conversations. For anyone who remembers, 16 years ago now, when Four Loko was the caffeinated alcohol scourge across America, that still sticks out in people's minds when they think of caffeine and THC. So, I think the format there's still so much education that needs to happen around consumers that this is why Cantrip doesn't currently produce any really, minor cannabinoid products aside from anything with THC and CBD, is just because we still have a huge distance to go just in educating people what THC and CBD are, that the inclusion of, another 10 to 30 minor cannabinoids of 3 and 4 different letter combinations is just, it's a little much for where the consumer is today.
Right.
And Pablo, let me just add to your regulatory question a few figures that we play around with as well. Yeah. We at Cycling Frog consider ourselves to be a CPG company. With the ingredients that we use are THC and CBD and others. So, CGMP, BRC standards, ISO 9001, we manufacture things, and I'm assuming that Adam and Brandon, and I would say 95% of the beverage community are working under incredibly strict regulatory groundwork. So to say that we are an unregulated industry and that we're flying by the seat of our pants is just false. The amount of audits that we have internally are pretty outstanding. Now, the numbers are a confusing one, Pablo, because there's really not any information state by state on volumes. Total Wines hasn't really shared, what their volumes are exactly about the volumes that are moving through each of those states. But we play around with a number between 5 and 6 million cases that hopefully will be sold this year. And that's kind of extrapolating from several of the big guys and figuring that I think that there's 105 brands now, Chris, around that, 100-ish. Yeah. So we're still a drop in the ocean when you consider energy market or the beer market or the spirits market or the wine market, but it is. To get to 6 million cases in its second year of sales is pretty good, isn't it?
Of course.
Just to touch really quick.
Just go on. Sorry, go on. Yeah, go on.
Just really quick on Art's point about the certifications. I mean, a lot of facilities do have, SQF, GMP, ISO, those types of things happen a lot at the larger scale. And the 3 brands on this call happen to be 3 of the brands that achieve the larger scale. I don't know if every brewer in Minnesota necessarily has that, nor do I necessarily know if they need that. But what happens in terms of, regulation versus non-regulation, the same reason Prop 65 is on basically every package in America is what happens in the hemp industry. Because Minnesota, because Tennessee are important marketplaces and they have regulations therein. In order to participate in those important marketplaces, you need to meet their regulations. So even if you don't come from Minnesota or even produce in Minnesota, you're probably meeting those standards, which is why basically, as soon as we have those Minnesota regulations, hemp beverage specifically and hemp, a lot of hemp edibles became, more regulated than they were before, generally speaking. So, while we all want to move towards a national regulation, it would be false to say that we're unregulated because just to participate, we need to be focused. And they do enforce those regulations in Minnesota for what it's worth.
Got it.
And
Arta,
just one more thing,
a couple
Pablo,
of
if
points
I
there.
could, on the
Hold on,
federal
hold on.
side, just one really quick. The U.S. Hemp Roundtable visited with 26 states in September and their state senators. And we were the only industry that has gone into that level requesting regulation. We are begging for regulation.
Right.
So just want to make that clear.
No, that's great. Thank you. Look, I mean, before we move on, going back to your point, Art, so 5 to 6 million cases this year, and I don't want to get too technical here, and I know that we don't have good data. So, what price point would you use on that? $20 per case, $30 per case?
20. Between a 6-pack and a 4-pack, let's say $19.99 average price. Out there, there's going to be more expensive and cheaper ones.
Again,
so you can extrapolate from there as to the size of the retail.
And of those 5 to 6 million, what percent would be what we call psychoactive? And again, I don't know if that's the right term to use here because
that would all be Delta 9 THC. That's all Delta 9 THC.
It's not including CBD case numbers.
Yeah.
Companies like Trip in California do incredible amounts of volume just selling CBD, zero psychoactive, and they're probably one of the best selling CBD brands out there still.
Okay. Look, before we move on, just on the question of consolidation, and again, not wanting to get too technical or too academic, we like to talk about barriers to entry in the industry. We see these potential CPG companies come in. We hear about Tilray, but here you guys are, having built some very strong brands that, in my opinion, have very good awareness out there. How do you think about that? These guys come in and rule the market, or they have to come in and buy brands? Any thoughts on that in terms of how consolidation may play out and how easy or difficult may be for these, larger companies, but very much newcomers to the category? Anybody that wants to jump in on that?
I'd be happy to jump in on that. So I think Tilray is a really interesting example of somebody who's entered the space because they're traded on the NASDAQ, as far as I'm aware, which is probably the furthest that anybody's really gone in bringing a THC product to a public marketplace. That said, they launched brands that are independent of existing Tilray brands, which is clearly a strategic choice on their part. But when I think about where we are in the space, and the reason that the companies today who are succeeding are positioned so well is because with the Miller Amendment still hanging over our heads, which I think we all, we'll probably talk about later, but we all agree that it's, maybe not likely to happen. But with it hanging over our heads, with these state, by state bans or things that we're constantly fighting, I don't think any of the bigger players are going to be ready to enter the space at all. Those with 100 million plus war chests to do it. For at least another year or two. And once they come in, there's going to be enough brand equity that I think they're going to go on a shopping spree and they're going to be really interested in a lot of these brands, but they're probably also going to try their own things. At the end of the day, one of the nice things about being in the space right now is that there's enough restrictions around it and enough confusion that makes it difficult for any one player to come in and basically buy up the whole space and use, $1 billion, marketing fund to make sure that they are the only brand aware space. So if you want to be far enough ahead right now so that you have some brand equity that you can work off of and build from, but if you're ahead of the pack, you're kind of there because there's no one bigger who's going to come in just yet. And then, they'll probably be positioning for acquisitions in the next, say, 2 years.
Yeah, and I can say that the Hemp Beverage Alliance regularly gets calls from private equity folks or people that are representing large CPG manufacturers, gathering information and trying to get a read as to where the category is heading. We also know that there are a lot of R&D going on and a lot of activity going on internally within a lot of these organizations. But to Adam's point, there's a risk management issue that happens when you're talking about a large corporation, a privately traded corporation, or somebody that's got a legacy reputation, and probably a lot of people that are more on the concern side than on the risk tolerance side. So I do think that that's going to break pretty quickly, and that there's going to be huge opportunity for brands like these and others that are blazing that trail for the benefit of the category with a lot of pain, that comes with that. So hopefully, fortune will favor all of them.
And Pablo, coming from the wine industry as my background, there's 1,000 wineries in each country, and each of those wineries has 2 or 3 main brands. And so when you go into a wine section anywhere on the planet, you're faced with 1,000 different SKUs, all saying different things, all from different countries. We're in the infancy of an entire new category. We are the first adjacent to alcohol product that gives humans a buzz. This is something groundbreaking. This is something fascinating. This is amazing to watch consumers digest what this is and enjoy what this is. So the way that I view marijuana companies coming into this, alcohol companies into this is, hey, the more the merrier. Alcohol companies, there's wine, beer, and spirits are all making their alcohol from different products, right? Grapes, wheat, barley, whatever you make it out of. We just happen to make ours out of hemp, and the marijuana industry just happens to make theirs out of marijuana. There's a future here where THC becomes what is regulated eventually, hopefully, and that's what we are selling to consumers under a very well done, well thought out regulatory framework.
Yeah, and maybe let me just use that as a segue to maybe expand on the product for those that are not so familiar, Art. There's an issue about nanoemulsion here, right? With beverages, the onset is much faster. It doesn't stay in the body as long as gummies. So maybe talk about that. And also maybe everyone in the panel here, when I think of dispensaries, they've done very well with vape, gummies, and other products, but not with cannabis beverages, right? And here you have this category outside dispensaries potentially doing quite well. So any thoughts on that, Art, or anyone else?
Yeah, we manufacture everything from soft gels to pills to gummies to brownies, you name it, topicals. And the fact of the matter is that beverages are difficult to merchandise. They're heavy. They don't always fit. A pallet doesn't fit easily on a truck compared to 5,000 vape pens. The typical vape shop, dispensary, whoever may be taking one of these beverages are not used to the space required to merchandise beverages. So I think the figures are between 2 and 3% of all dispensary sales are beverages, and maybe even less now.
It's lower than that for sure.
Lower than
It's
that.
lower than that, especially with the low dose, right? The 5 and 10 milligram serving in a beverage in a dispensary is no sales.
Right. And when you're going into a dispensary, most people are going in there for a specific reason, and that's high doses of some form of an intoxicant. Whereas what we're doing by selling our products in traditional marketplaces, our target demographic are women over the age of 40. These are soccer moms. These are people playing mahjong. These are people replacing certain alcohols with this product and really enjoying themselves. And so, Pablo, your question as to how these people are consuming this, it's really fascinating. To sip THC is very different than smoking THC. So when you smoke THC, you're inhaling anywhere between 10 and possibly even 50 to 100 milligrams of THC on some big ass puffs. Whereas you're just basically downing a half a milligram, maybe a milligram over a 10-minute period, and then you get another one. So I would say it's a much more gradual buzz, as I suggest to people, hey, what was it like the first time you had, 3 or 4 beers? How did you feel? Did you drink 50 of them the first time? Probably if you're a young person, yeah. But this is all new. And one of the things that we've been really fighting, and hopefully coming to more alignment is with the marijuana industry, where they look at what we're doing because we've been given rules different to the marijuana rules. We're just following the rules that we've been given. We are normalizing this product across an array of folks who would never go into a dispensary, ever. And so if the woman playing mahjong has a couple of cycling frogs, loves the way she feels, the chances of her going into the dispensary and buying actual marijuana products is pretty high.
Yeah, actually, Boris Jordan said that a couple years ago at Benzinga before they ever launched their hemp beverage line. This actually might have been right before they launched their Endless Coast line here in Massachusetts, which was a marijuana beverage. But he said that they saw in their data that customers started with highly formulated products and then would graduate to flower, vapes, and concentrates gradually over time. Now, I haven't seen that data, but clearly that's an ethos they've continued with. If I could just stay on the vein of why this doesn't work in dispensaries for just a second, being a company that produced here in Massachusetts for dispensaries, there's a lot of different reasons it doesn't work. First, like Art says, it's merchandising. It's not just that it's difficult to merchandise, it's impossible in dispensaries. When we first started, we encountered a lot of vaults. Anyone who's familiar with regulated East Coast cannabis, everything has to be kept in a vault and behind the counter. If at night it has to move back into the vault, it can't sit out on the floor. And so when you're talking about beverages, sometimes people are carrying these cases up and down stairs. Sometimes the vaults aren't big enough because they're only really designed. Beverages are the lowest in what you might call economic density in terms of the actual physical size and weight of the product versus the revenue. So when you're a dispensary group, what you're looking at is basically a product which has the lowest margin of anything you're going to make, the highest capex of anything you're going to make, and has a distinctively difficult time transporting, working with metric. And then if you're in a state like Massachusetts or New Jersey, you have a 5 milligram cap on a serving. So, the best you could hope for is 5, or when Massachusetts started, about $7 per can. So the pricing doesn't really work either. And so there's no mix that works for dispensaries for beverages, which is why Cantrip cut that as essentially a necrotic arm of our business. And we were able to move a lot more freely after that. But they would need to basically fix the interstate issues, change how things are set on the floor. The distance between us and having an effective dispensary beverage system is very, very great. And there's really no reason to do it because, like Art said, people don't really show up at dispensaries for beverages. They show up for marijuana, they show up for gummies. And given all of that, you're capturing a different consumer in the liquor store channel. Though I would say, Art, that a lot of those dispensaries are also going after soccer moms, so they are competing for that business. But they may be more likely to get it if they start with a beverage, right? And so that's kind of the pitch here.
No, thank you. That's great color there. Chris, let's move the discussion now to what's happening at the state level. I know we don't want to discuss every single state, but an update of the latest regs at the state level. You decide which ones you want to highlight. Are there examples where state rules for hemp drinks that actually have been bifurcated from rules for other hemp-derived products? I think in New Jersey, Connecticut might be an example. And also, if you can provide examples of state frameworks where that work, in your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of consistent discussion about the shutdowns and really negative impacts that the industry are facing, but we often forget about those successes that are happening. There are plenty of states that are already established, regimes that are or regulatory regimes that work and that we're seeing extreme success in. When we talk about Minnesota, and as Adam reminded me this morning, Tennessee is the gold star of the Southeast right now. But the state of Georgia is coming online with a regulatory framework that is going to be something that we can start to work with. And then, across the, whether it's Ohio, Arizona, Wisconsin, Illinois, and a variety of other states we're looking into that next legislative session in 2025, where we envision frameworks being discussed and developed. The one good thing about this is that as we are moving forward, and more stakeholders are seeing the opportunity and the value of having a regulatory framework, the hemp industry and the hemp beverage industry are developing really strong coalitions with alcohol partners in distribution and retail, as well as craft brewers and other folks that have an interest in the adult beverage category. So what we do envision is that in places where there maybe is what you would describe as a yellow state on the red, yellow, green model of what's good, bad, and not so sure. We envision a lot of those yellow states getting regulatory frameworks in place, or at least discussions about those regulatory frameworks in the next 6 or 7 months. So yeah, we talk about Georgia as the latest one to come on with a framework, and it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But what it has said is that it is recognizing the category. And, just like alcohol when it first started out post-prohibition, these are going to continue to be regulations that change, adapt, and get better understood over time. We've seen this in Minnesota over the past couple of years. They had some, onerous regulations, some of them relatively absurd when they started out. And then, as the years go by, they realize that the harms weren't there, or the threats weren't there, or the ability to regulate or monitor weren't available, and so they dropped those. So, Minnesota has already advanced. They're moving to kegs up there. You can get these on tap in a lot of locations. And as we said before, stuff like a 5-hour rule or some kind of, requirement to make sure that if you're drinking THC, you're only drinking THC at a bar as opposed to switching from alcohol to THC. Those regulations that they originally proffered are being put by the wayside because, again, the industry matures and everybody gets a better understanding of the landscape.
Thank you. Go on. Sorry.
I think something to add on the state framework that we're offering as a category that you've never seen before is 4 to 5% tax structures built into this product, whereas alcohol is less than 1%. When states start to really understand the commercial scope, the fact that there is direct harm reduction, reduced alcohol consumption, obviously there's real correlation there, but it's the revenue, right? This is the first time that cannabis has been commercially available at scale to a broad consumer base, and it's generating in these states tens of millions of dollars and will be hundreds of millions of dollars in larger markets like California, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, New York especially. So like Chris said, everything doesn't happen in one step. I think there's positive momentum in markets that are meaningful, that matter, that can support the category, and we're going to continue to carve out local policy that just gets better and better and is more cohesive across the country as we build and reform and build and reform.
And if I could just coast on the back of that for a second, I mean, Minnesota is a great example of a state that passed a law in 2022. The law had one of the most important things on it, which was a tax. That tax money was then raised in January of 23. They hired something like 30 inspectors who went out to every store in Minnesota, pulled products off the shelf, checked their packaging, checked their labeling, scanned the QR codes on the side of the can, checked the COAs, and they issued a bunch of pull product orders for brands that weren't compliant. The direct thing that happened next after that, distributors started demanding and checking all of these things before they ever brought a brand in. They became sort of a natural regulation point because no distributor wants to deal with the hassle of sending something to retail, only then to have to take it back because the regulator said you have to pull this product. So that's the most clear example of how you set up a regulatory framework that you can then enforce by using tax money, because what we see with a lot of these bans is they'll pass a ban, but they'll actually put no enforcement resources behind it, which is exactly what just happened in California, which is exactly what happens in New Jersey. And every time you do that, you end up with, bad actors who are not interested in voluntarily complying with laws, keeping products on shelves, continuing to sell with essentially no repercussions, whereas folks that are selling in normal liquor stores, because liquor stores have, licenses that could be in jeopardy, and because they have reputations to uphold, they voluntarily pull products. So everybody on this call is going to essentially pull a product if a ban comes into place, but that's not necessarily going to be the case for all other products. And so we see something like in New Jersey, what we want to propose as we come around to the next round of legislation is we really want to use some of that tax revenue to also help the marijuana industry. There's a huge gap in what's the social equity fund there, which is called the CEF. And so what we're trying to propose is regulate and tax hemp beverages in the state of New Jersey, which are already selling, thousands and thousands of cases annually. And then you can use some of that to offset the gap for the CEF and maybe reduce some of the incredible tax burden that is placed on marijuana companies, because let's be real, all of those are overtaxed in the first place. And so we can be participatory and help rather than be, have any sort of enmity between the two, essentially same sides of the plant or different sides of the plant.
Got it. Thank you. Art, I want to move the discussion now to, distribution and building brands. So in terms of what you can share, tell us about how much of your business is DTC versus B2B. I mean, from outside, I assume that as a new company, new category, you start with DTC and then you build distribution with B2B. but talk about that. Can you be in places like Amazon? I see some of the brands in Amazon, I suppose, are they not intoxicating products? But again, how do you build the brand? How do you build awareness? And how do you go about distribution in terms of what you can share?
So we were fortunate to have quite a large database of, and I'm assuming Brandon as well, with Cheech and Chong database. At Lazarus Naturals, we make high-dose CBD products mainly for veterans. 60-70% of all of our consumers are veterans. And so we had a database of about 30,000 people that were the first consumers of Cycling Frog beverages. So that was helpful to see. I would say the split right now is pretty even between the three different models that we use. One is D2C, the other is wholesale, we call, which is offering to smoke shop, vape shops, smaller independent stores the opportunity to pass a credit check, to pass our due diligence, and then become buyers of these products and drop ship to other vape shops. As you know, there's more vape shops in the United States than there are any other retail shops, and it's a place where alcohol distributors typically are not going to be visiting, maybe someday, but not today. And then the third is obviously partnering with alcohol distributors. So we have 30 states where we're partnering with alcohol distributors, and that can range from Miller Coors, Anheuser-Busch distributors, all the way down to small craft beer and wine and spirits distributors. So I would say it's across the board. Obviously, there's all the well-known distributor names that we don't need to mention here, that are all looking at this segment as craft beer and wine sales drastically decrease in volume. These people have massive sales forces. Southern Glazer's Wines and Spirits just fired most of their fine wine division
Do
last
we
week.
know the number? Has anybody heard the number?
It's pretty big. I think it's in the hundreds.
Wow.
Hundreds of people.
need
And
some
so,
new reps.
there's something's happening in the alcohol distribution and retail industry that has really shone a light on these hemp-derived THC beverages. We are a very high margin product compared to the beer industry. We are, I believe, even higher margin than most spirits and wine. So when you talk to distributors or when you talk to retailers who want to get into this space, the financial incentives for this are immense. So once you add regulatory to this and a framework that works, once you add taxation to this with a taxation that makes sense, this is basically just like a whole new, brand new segment of the CPG world.
Yeah. Before I get Adam and Brandon to chip in there, Chris, I think you recently presented at the MBWA conference. What was the response? National.
Sure, yeah. So back in October 2nd, I believe, we met with the National Beer Wholesalers Association, spoke for about an hour to Art, you were in there. I don't know, 150, 170 people were in that room.
Quite a lot of people.
Very well received, and what I thought was fascinating was the robust questions of how to do it right. The audience was coming in, understanding the category, and again, it's just trying to figure out how to integrate these in such a way that public health and quality control of the category continues to thrive and become a priority or be a priority for it. What I would say that our discussion aside, what was more exciting was the opening discussion with Rebecca Meisel, who is the incoming chairman of the board of directors for NBWA, who specifically pointed out in her opening remarks the need to approach and put our category as a point of discussion and opportunity for that organization. And the follow-up from that, again, pointed questions, and we recognize the value of a partnership with alcohol distributors because they know things that we don't. They've been around for years and years, and we're a new category, and we don't come in trying to pretend to tell them what to do. We come in and say, how do we make this in such a way that it works for everybody? And when we talk about everybody, it's not just our category and the distributors, but it's also the regulators that they work with, the consumers that they are ultimately selling to, and the retailers obviously as well. So the feedback that we got was strong. The email inquiries that we got afterwards were significant. And I think the energy that's coming around this category, people are getting it now. And I think the one closing point that I made was that, marijuana has historically been considered an existential threat to the alcohol industry. Hemp beverages are an existential opportunity for the distributor industry. And I think when you recognize that 99% of what we sell is exactly the same, it's the only difference is the one active molecule, ethanol versus THC. But I mean, other than that, it's a heavy can of water with some other inert ingredients in it. Obviously, there's more nuance to it than that. But I think when you frame it that way, it really does resonate.
Right.
And
Brandon,
Pablo,
you
just
want
to
share your thoughts?
Pablo, just to follow up on MBWA and WSWA, the two biggest wholesaling groups for the wine, spirits, and the beer industries. We still have an uphill battle to climb. I mean, I would say, and you'll agree with me on this, Chris, 50% of the MBWA members and 50% of the WSWA members are still not convinced. They're worried about losing their TTB alcohol license. They are worried about getting in trouble. They're worried about voicing their opinions out to the market, to people who might be a little bit more conservative in their territories. So there's still a massive education side to this that we need to, constantly be teaching our distributors and our partners about. And but I think that's changed. I mean, full transparency, the first phone call that I made, 99% of all the distributors we called the first year did not respond. And now it's basically, now we're getting calls.
It's funny, Art, because I don't have the same background you do, and I don't have the brand to the longstanding brand credibility that Cheech and Chong has. And this year has been just crazy for us because I spent the first 3-4 months of this year desperately calling distributors everywhere in this country and sending emails. I did the same last year too. And it was I think it was April this year, I got an email back from a distributor in New Jersey that I had emailed initially in February of 2023, and they responded on that thread. And it's just the difference between the beginning of this year and the summer of this year is just absolutely bananas in terms of the distributor, connection. And, they have the credibility with their retailers that can really help expand the space. It's hard to show up to a retailer. I've done a lot of sales calls personally. And, it's hard to show up into a retailer selling essentially weed in a can and have them take you seriously. Whereas, if you do it with the credibility of an Anheuser-Busch or Molson Coors or, any of the other major distributors, it really goes a long way to building credibility. And then once a liquor store is carrying it, their customers feel more comfortable purchasing it because they've been going to that liquor store for 10 or 20 years and they're not going to steer them wrong. So, the vibe shift is very real this year.
Yep.
Yeah, and I have to say, I mean, when you say 50%, Art, I mean, to me, that sounds bullish, right? I mean, it's really you've been able to persuade half of the industry right, on the distribution
pretty
side.
quickly, too.
That's great.
Yep.
Brandon, anything?
I think the minute there's oh, go ahead, Pablo.
No, go on. I mean, anything you want to share in terms of your DTC strategy versus B2B? Any thoughts there? But go ahead, Brandon. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I think the last domino to fall will just be a large on-premise activation of some kind, right? We now have the wholesale distribution partners involved, right? A significant percentage of them, major retailers. I think as soon as we start to see some on-premise activation at scale, that will probably be one of the last things
you probably
to fully
see the
activate.
same thing that we do, which is that's largely an insurance issue. On-prem, many on-prem accounts are very eager to take this in and do it in a big way, but they'll contact their insurance provider. And that's really where a lot of things get slowed down in this industry is not actually even regulators. It could be insurance providers or banks or, I mean, a lot of people in the the quote unquote marijuana industry like to suggest that hemp has an easy time of it. But I mean, it is still much more difficult than a traditional product. You still can't get, traditional debt financing in most cases. You can't get, it's still harder to get a bank account than normal. And it's a hell of a hard time to get insurance done or people to do your taxes. Just, giant pain in the ass everywhere you go, just like it is in marijuana, to be honest.
Brandon, can you expand on the idea of how do you use Amazon to build awareness? I mean, I suppose you can sell in Amazon for functional drinks, right? Or it doesn't work that way?
So, the only products we sell on Amazon would be like licensed things like apparel and merch. We don't sell any of the drinks because if you are seeing a cannabis beverage on there that is even
Not hemp,
representing
it's not hemp, right?
CBD, it's
Yeah,
Okay.
you can sell
it's not a
broad spectrum
yeah,
hemp or a
yeah,
functional product of other
yeah.
types. A lot of times, Amazon will just shut down broad spectrum hemp products because, frankly, Amazon disincentivizes you to properly label your product. And that, like, people will sell 1,000 milligram CBD gummy, and you'll have no idea how much is in it because they can't actually put that on their Amazon listing. But you do see brands like Breeze being successful and basically having non-THC functional beverages that they put online, and that I mean, I think that numbers Aaron's posted have been somewhere north of half their sales can be through it because they also have TikTok Shop, all these really restrictive platforms. Breeze is seeding those markets with non-THC versions of their products, and then they all that helps build the brand for the rest of the category as well, which is a knock-on effect for their
But I mean,
DTC.
correct me if I'm wrong here. Like you said, Art, in the case of Cheech and Chong and Cycling Frog, to some extent, you had already brand awareness before you enter drinks compared to other players. Is that true or not?
I would say more of a consumer base and
Okay.
then
Through
launching a
license.
product to that consumer base.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and it's a very small consumer base. I mean,
Yeah.
I would say 99% of our D2C sales right now, before we join a couple of other online platforms like Wasan, who is joining right now and are going to be launching a non-alc section with THC as well.
Yeah.
Everyone has to go to our websites.
Sure.
They just think of Cycling Frog, or they think of Cantrip, or they think of Cheech and Chong, and they have to buy directly from us. So we cannot sell on Amazon our D9 products.
Right. No, I know that D9 not, but I thought that some people were selling type of hemp-based products and CBD products that were, but that was a
Yeah,
good.
but the problem with that is exactly what Adam said.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that people can label it just saying it's a hemp product, they don't really need to say that there's 2,000 milligrams of CBD in this thing.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
they'll
looked.
they'll flag them literally as million milligram hemp
yeah.
packs,
Yeah.
which
Pablo,
could just be
to your earlier point about like where do you build the brand equity first? Do you build the indirect to consumer and then move on to retail? I mean, Cantrip's taken a pretty different approach in this space, but part of it comes down to money. Like if you are a well-capitalized company, I think the best way to go is go directly at retail and go at it hard because that is where brands are built. That's where household names are made. Whereas direct to consumer, because of the way that targeting works for ads, you tend not to have like you tend to go really deep into certain types of people, but not as broad base in terms of like general knowledge, and you have less visibility to people, right? Because the visibility is really about the wall of Coca-Cola products that you see on store shelves. But if you're a small brand who has only access to $100,000 in capital to get started, you're probably going to need to build DTC sales and generate some cash flow. But it's an incredibly difficult process. There's no cheap way to start a beverage company, whether you're in marijuana, hemp, or just making a seltzer. And so, at the end of the day, Cantrip's really approached an aggressive retail strategy. And while we still haven't maybe risen to this like the Cycling Frog or Cheech and Chong levels, we only do about 10% of our sales as direct to consumer. We could probably improve upon that. But being from a dispensary background, I didn't found this company with any concept that we would ever be selling these products directly online to people. And so we've had to start, working to bring some of that kind of talent in-house because it's a completely different business model than running a retail,
I
operation.
hear you. I hear you. Look, I know we're going to be running out of time. Let me just last section here talk about supply chain. Brandon, I'll start with you. Do you use, I suppose, third-party manufacturers? What can you share about the ingredients, the product that you make? There's this whole discussion about natural versus synthetic. What can you share in terms of supply chain, Brandon?
We started creating an emulsion product actually in 2019 that went into a tincture product very early on that was sold widely direct to consumer. So we've got an FDA registered facility, just like Art kind of suggested. It's GMP certified through the state of Utah Department of Agriculture permit. So we create a lot of products there. We've got partnerships in emulsion where we actually own the high pressure homogenizing equipment that's in different markets, and we partner with emulsion providers that we feel like have a great manufacturing base. From there, we move in as far as the beverages into co-mans throughout the country because truly the scale we're running, and most beverage businesses, if they get much scale at all, the concept of manufacturing your beverage in-house is, pretty distant in terms of accessibility and risk reward ratio to deploying capital, right? You can find really great co-man partners with huge scale that are really buttoned up from a regulatory and process driven standpoint and get excellent products made at scale with a very low margin in terms of what you'd produce in-house if you decided to take all of that on. So from our perspective, it's really about being nimble with our manufacturing partners and getting as close to the markets that we have deep penetration in to reduce the freight and inventory and storage costs, because that is substantial in beverage. And I don't think most companies ever consider that in their pro forma before they get started. They just have no idea what freight and shipping and storage is going to do to the bottom line.
Art, thank you. Art, same question on supply chain, especially if you can distinguish about the argument of synthetic versus natural. How does that play out?
Sure. I mean, we're a lot more like the wine industry, Pablo. The fact that we have our own genetics, our own land where we grow our hemp, our own nano emulsification, our own manufacturing for everything up until the point of bottling, putting water and some carbonation into our formulations. And then by the end of 2025, we should be fully integrated as a fully vertically integrated production company as well. So as far as natural and synthetic, this is something that's going to need to be defined. The Wyden bill clearly puts out some groundwork on this and some guardrails as well. The fact of the matter is that we take aspirin every single day, and that's synthesized from stuff that was found in tree bark. So, this stuff is a long-winded beginning of a bit of a battle that's going to have to happen. We are all about naturally derived products ourselves internally, but we also think that there's probably some amazing cannabinoids out there that we don't even know about that may be synthetically derived in the future that are going to be beneficial for humans. So why shut that down completely? I think it needs to be regulated and really viewed at carefully, though.
Well, that's an important distinction, Art, because when you think about aspirin, the salicylic acid that comes from the tree bark, you can't find aspirin naturally occurring in nature and then just purify it out of bark, right? You have to do something reacting to it. And so that's, when we take our approach to ironically, we don't actually have all natural products for every one of our line. Our sodas have some artificial ingredients, but we do use naturally extracted Delta-9 THC specifically for the reason that you can find it in nature. So we want to find it in nature. But if there are cannabinoids that are useful for things, beyond what are phytocannabinoids, then we do want to have pathways to that. But I tend to think that's going to fall more under the pharma side of things than just, selling randomly synthesized chemicals to people, frankly. But, the naturally derived supply chain can only go so far. You do need to support the hemp industry generally. You need to have all sorts of different cannabinoids involved in the marketplace. Otherwise, the entire market collapses, not just for intoxicating hemp products, but for hemp products at large.
And I would say, Paulo, that the entire beverage industry, I guess I can speak on behalf of all of us, we are not into whatever is being sold in some gas stations, some convenience stores that contain 27 different types of cannabinoids that we don't even know about, that have 1,000 milligrams of something in a gummy. I've been handed many vapes and many bags of gummies with things in it that I would never eat. I don't know what they do. And so, yes, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the synthetic side.
Yeah, no, that's great. Look, I know we're almost out of time here. We'll probably go past the hour. Closing remarks from each of you. I'll start with Chris. But, Chris, again, closing remarks, but also your best prediction of how things may play out in terms of regulatory changes, federal, state level, and also, your key message to regulators out there. But let's start with you, Chris, in terms of closing remarks. Thank you.
Yeah, and the key message to regulators is that we are looking forward to working with you. We recognize, and I was at a compliance seminar the other day. I'm like, regulators, they're just like people. They're just like everyone in this audience, everyone in this group. We are overworked, we are underfunded, and we're all trying to do the right thing. We as an organization, we as an industry recognize that. And, the more that we can open up that dialogue and work together, leveraging our knowledge and expertise in the industry, leveraging your knowledge and expertise from regulatory frameworks, I think we're going to see real success at the state level. At the federal level, I think we're going to continue to see slow motion. I know that both of the major party candidates have supported marijuana legalization. I think that is that is out there is an indication of how these times they are a changing. And as Adam indicated, the change in our experiences in January are significantly different than what our experiences are in this category today. And I feel like that rapid transformation and understanding of this product and of this category is going to continue in that hockey stick trajectory. It's like whatever the adage is that, 2 weeks of change can sometimes take years, and then years of change can happen automatically, or whatever that adage is. I think we're at that point where we're going to see things falling into place in rapid succession in the states, and then ultimately at the federal level.
Right.
And then my last closing statement for anybody who is interested in learning more about the category as a whole, hemp-beveragealliance.org. We are open to everybody that wants to join, whether you're a brand, a VC, a regulator, et cetera. We're here to bring the category up and educate everybody.
Yeah. Chris, not to put you on the spot, but just one question there in terms of, federal changes, in terms of regulation of hemp drinks. Would that be part of a farm bill? It's meant to be a separate standalone bill. And, Senator McConnell stepping down, does that, play into all this in any way? Just a brief answer, and again, not to put you on the spot here.
You can put me on the spot. Everybody's got an opinion on the farm bill. My personal take, and this is not necessarily the HBA's take, I think that, that the hemp aspect of the farm bill is a very small part of a very, very large farm bill. It's a $500 billion bill that needs to get passed for the existence and well-being of millions of people that have nothing to do with our category. And so I think we need to take it from that perspective of the goal is to create a farm bill that works for the 99% of the people that or the 99% of it. And I don't envision a situation in which that is going to be spoiled because of this very small 4-page section that is currently written in the 2018 bill.
Right, got it. Brandon, and each one of you, Art and Adam, yes, closing remarks, but assume that there are people listening here that are from CPG companies, venture capital, private equity, potential, partners, potential competitors, regulators out there. Anything you want to say to them? And again, these are closing remarks. I'll start with you, Brandon. Whatever you want to say.
Yeah, I would second exactly what Chris actually, touched on. The reality is, I think, we all say the toothpaste is out of the tube. This is a product that now has enough consumer awareness and adoption. I don't think it's going to go away. I think that, to believe that it could be regulated out of existence is, just not realistic. You can just look at the illicit cannabis market in the traditional markets like California, where they haven't been able to get, the black market under control, or the free market as they call it now. In a market like California, there is $100 to $200 million in tax base if this category is released and regulated properly into the liquor store channel. I'd be remiss not to mention it, right? All of us were operating in that market under an approved California industrial hemp policy with Bill AB 45, and we're selling in billion-dollar retail stores that were selling this product effectively to adults in a controlled manner. And rather than taking the time to parse the details, the regulators in California came out and decided to sweep the shelves. What it has done is galvanize the industry. And I think the message now that everybody needs to take away is that we have the ability to kind of stay the course. And that's going to happen in Georgia and Minnesota and markets like Florida that we continue to blaze a new territory. And we'll be back bigger than ever in California in 2025, because the entire cannabis category, I think, understands as an industry that, the two sides of the plant, marijuana and hemp, will survive together. And if they're not working together, the level of the likelihood of survival is decreased in very real terms.
Thank you. Art?
I'll just say that please stop by your local Total Wines and More, Liquor Barn, Specs, Rouse's, Bevmo, GoPuff online, local convenience stores, gas stations, smoke shops, wherever you can, try these products. They're really great. I'm 53 years old, and I've witnessed an absolute transformation in 50% of my friends who have begun drinking these products, and lives have been affected in such a positive way, Pablo. It's really beautiful to see. And we want to take that energy around the world. There's no reason why people over the age of 21 can't decide for themselves to drink something that has THC in it or alcohol.
Thank you. Adam.
Yeah, I'll use my time to correct Art because Bevmo can't sell weed anymore because they're in California specifically.
We're going to launch in Arizona.
Okay, good. There's Bevmos in Arizona. Thank God, guys. No, I mean, I think everybody should check out. There's a reason that, the three brands of this call are also on the board of the HBA. We're all working together here, and in many ways, we've been able to successfully engage with the cannabis community at large. Every cannabis company, whether it's marijuana or hemp, is eventually going to be the same thing. Every large marijuana company is becoming, at least in part, a hemp company. We mentioned Cureleaf and Tilray. I saw some job listings for GTI, having a beverage director position coming up. And so everybody's going to participate in this. This is when Boris Jordan said at that same Benzinga that I referenced earlier in the spaces, he said that he believes one day beverages will be 50% of the cannabis market. At that time, he was basically laughed at by everybody. I don't know what he knew then specifically, because this was right before the Minnesota bill actually did get signed by Governor Walz. And by the way, we have a VP candidate who is, probably the only governor in America who really knows what a hemp beverage actually is. But what Boris Jordan knew then, I don't know, but he is absolutely right. This is going to be 50% plus of the cannabis market. It's going to bring new people in. It's going to create access for people to THC that can otherwise may never be able to access it. I don't know when Iowa plans to legalize recreational cannabis, but they have legalized up to 4 milligrams of THC in a beverage. And that makes them more progressive than my home state of Massachusetts right now. So we're in a marvelous phase for anybody to be a strong player in the hemp beverage industry. And so if you're anybody out there thinking of participating, join the Hemp Beverage Alliance, get some information, talk to people, talk to us. You can find me very visibly on Twitter because we're happy to help.
Okay, thank you very much to all of you, to all the speakers, Christopher Lackner, Brandon Harshbarger, Massolo, Adam Terry, everyone. Thank you for joining today. And again, a big thank you to all the speakers. Have a good day.
Thank you, Pablo. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. Thanks for all listening in.
Cheers. Bye.